Hi, welcome to Close to the Bone, Surgeons and Chefs. I'm your host, Alan Schuchuk. Today we're going to venture into the wonderful world of ribs. First of all, our own Dr. Rick's going to go see Daryl, our meat man, and he's actually going to cut us a side of ribs. Then we're going to go talk to Professor John, who's going to talk about the difference between human ribs and the ribs we find on pork and beef. Then when we come back, our special guest, Dr. Gary Gelfand, a thoracic surgeon, is going to join me in the kitchen, and we're going to make two absolutely scrumptious rib recipes. A baked pork rib recipe, and then a braised Zinfandel short rib recipe. So, let's get to know a little bit more about our special guest, Dr. Gary Gelfand, and what better place to find a doctor than on a golf course.
My name is Gary Gelfand, and I'm a thoracic surgeon. A thoracic surgeon is someone who operates on surgical diseases of the chest. I operate on mostly things like lung cancer, cancers of the swallowing tube that are called esophageal cancer, and a number of other conditions which are quite uncommon but are quite significant if you have them and quite serious if you have them. I found a recipe that involves the use of Coca-Cola, and it is the greatest recipe in the world. It gives the ribs, it makes them sweet, but the Coke also, Coke dissolves nails, so it does good on the ribs too, so they're very succulent. I'm swaying, that's what I'm doing. In a lighthearted fashion, if I ever retired from this, I love to cook, but my family was in the restaurant business, so I know it's like the worst, and in my wife's family too, so I know it's like the worst business in the world, but I actually like to cook a lot.
Up next, Dr. Rick hooks up with our meat man, Daryl, and we get down to business in the kitchen.
Hello again, Rick.
I'm back, Daryl.
You are. What's cooking today?
I'm really excited because we're going to be doing some short ribs and we're going to be doing some St. Louis ribs.
Okay, one's beef, one's pork. Let's go in the back. I'll spread them out for you.
Okay.
Well, this is your average market pig or hog. It's about 6 to 8 months old. They range between 70 and 90 pounds a side. And your regards to ribs, on St. Louis ribs, they come from the hog. And your short ribs, they come from the beef. And with St. Louis ribs, what those are, it's the first cut of the side ribs right here. So it's the nice part of the ribs. So this is the front quarter. That's where we're going to get our short ribs from. Also called long ribs, Hawaiian ribs, or Maui ribs. And all those just depend on how they are cut. So full cut between the muscle would be a Hawaiian rib. Very thinly sliced across, about 1/4 inch, is a Maui rib. A short rib is 1 inch to 1.5 inch cut. And a long rib is split down the middle, and then the rib is split in half. And those are your 4 ribs.
Hey, welcome to the kitchen. Glad to have our special guest here, thoracic surgeon, Dr. Gary Gelfand. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Alan.
Now, we're going to make some ribs today. We're going to make some pork ribs and some short ribs. And when we're talking about rib recipes, a lot of them have combinations of what we're going to see today. Some sweet, some savory, some acid, some heat. And almost all rib recipes have to be cooked for an awfully long time. Now, why would that be?
Well, the ribs are really quite tough. They have a lot of sinew and collagen, and so if you don't cook them, you have to find some way of breaking down that so that the meat is going to be soft. And so you can try and break it down with chemicals, but that tastes lousy, or you can cook it slowly and that breaks down the protein so that the meat is softer.
Right, and when you talk about collagens, we're really talking about the protein in the meat, correct?
Yes.
And let's take a look at some of these short ribs. Our first recipe actually is going to just take advantage of everything we've just said. We're going to make a Zinfandel braised short rib recipe with lots of savory, lots of hot, lots of sweet, and we're going to use these short ribs. And so Gary, what is it that the ribs actually do? What function do they have?
Well, the ribs have a couple functions. First off, they protect the important structures in the central part of your body. So it would not be a good idea that you had no protection around your heart or your lungs, and so that's one thing. It's a bony cage. The second thing that the ribs do is they help with breathing, and so they work like a bellows system, and they allow the bellows to move up and down, and that allows you to take air in.
Well, I can tell you this, despite all of our technical talk, I'm holding these short ribs and I'm starting to get a little bit hungry. So why don't we cook our first recipe today, which is a Zinfandel short rib recipe.
Sounds like a great idea.
All right, well what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the marinade and the sauce ready, and what I'd like you to do is use your surgical skills to cut these into short ribs on the bone if you could, and then I'm going to get started on our recipe.
Now, it's a common misconception that surgeons cut meat at home, because I have a long-standing policy that my wife does it. Well, otherwise, I screw it up.
And do you cook a lot at home?
Yeah, well, it depends on whom you're asking, my wife or I. I like to cook, but I tend to be fairly busy and don't cook as much as I'd otherwise like to.
Well, we're going to do a little bit more of the cooking that I think a lot of people would like to do with ribs, because the thing about this recipe is we're going to make this and then we're going to let the ribs marinate and then we're going to throw them in the oven for a while. So the nice thing about this is we're going to take our time. So back to the savory and the hot and the sweet part, we're going to start off with about a cup of onions, about a half a cup of leeks that I've chopped. And when you're cooking with leeks, be sure that you clean them really well, because in between them you'll find that within the ribs of the leeks that you might find some dirt.
The ribs of the leeks?
The ribs of the leeks. And well, it's a rib show. And we've got some garlic here that we've chopped really finely, about 6 cloves actually. The surprise of this dish, 2 really nicely coarsely chopped jalapenos. That's going to give us some heat. And lastly, to give us a little bit of tang, 1 Granny Smith apple, again nicely chopped. So what we're going to do is we've got this basically going, and like I say, this is just going to go into our marinade. So
okay. What do you want me to do here?
Well, what we just want to do is before we do anything, we're going to take the Zinfandel. And what you want here is, you don't have to use Zinfandel. This recipe calls for it, but a nice, strong, flavorful, and Zinfandel is a spicy wine. Okay. It's got a little bit of higher alcohol content, but that's all going to burn off. And so what we want to do with this is marinade is we want to put about 4 cups of red wine into it. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you could, without crowding the pan, okay, is just put our ribs in there to cook. Now, what you need to know about these types of recipes is that once you're to this stage, you know, you can let this cook as slowly as you want, for as long as you want, and in fact, you could even take it out and reheat it the next day. This is a wonderful recipe for that, and a great way to take advantage of the beautiful meat on these short ribs. So earlier we were seeing you hitting a few golf balls. Anything we need to know about your golf swing and the way ribs work?
Yeah, actually, I pulled my rib the other day golfing, and it was really sore. But no, the ribs are actually, they're pretty important, as is a few of the big muscles so that sit on the side of your chest, like the latissimus, are very important in golf swings. Having said that, for whatever I know about golf swings, it hasn't helped my game that much.
Well, you can see that we're getting these nicely browned, and that's what you want. That's exactly what you want here. I'll just, is that nice, really, really deep brown texture on all the sides of these ribs. And between the two of us, I think we've got them nicely flipped.
Oh, one more.
One more.
Hiding in the corner.
And there we go.
And we haven't burnt ourselves.
We haven't.
Yes.
Which is a hazard of the kitchen. Okay. Now, what we can do now is I'm just going to turn the heat down on this. And really what we want to do, and I'm going to get you to help me scrape this pan, is we're going to just pour all of this, and this would have been the marinade, all into this pan. There we go. Beautiful. Well, Gary, we've got a very good thing happening here. We've got everything in one pan, and this is ready to go into about a 350-degree oven for 3 to 4 hours, until the meat is about fork tender. And as a side for this dish, we've got some carrots, we've got some potatoes, we've got some rutabaga, we've got some red pepper for some color, and just put them all on a nice pan like this.
Red peppers aren't roots, right?
They're not. No,
okay,
they're
I'm
not.
Just checking, making sure.
They're not, but that is just for
some
color.
of the cooking phrases.
You pass me the olive oil, which has the cork in it there.
Sure.
And this is, again, simple is the way to do this, and this is what's nice about cooking this at home, is that you can do this recipe and you can basically not muss and fuss about it. Everything goes into the oven. So just sprinkle a whole bunch of olive oil over that, and I'm just going to go behind you here, grab a little bit of salt and pepper.
Okay. Should adequately cover our arteries.
Exactly. Leave that for the heart surgeons. And all you want to do is just get a nice covering of kosher salt on here, a little bit of black pepper. So once these are nicely coated, if I can get you to open up the oven again, these can go in for, I don't know, let's just say you could try them about after half an hour or so in about the same oven. and we're ready to go. All right, well, there are a few steps left to finish these ribs. These have been in there for, as I said, about 4 hours, and you can just see how beautiful the glaze on those ribs is going to be. And if you could, please just take the ribs out and carefully put them on the plate. Now, because these have been in here for about 3 or 4 hours, the meat is going to be nice and tender, but you can see that they're bound around them. And what is that, that fiber that is keeping some of the ribs in there?
Well, that's the pleura, I think, if that's what we're pointing at. And that's the lining of the chest cavity.
And you can see how beautiful these short ribs are when they come out. They're nice and brown. They've got the deep color from the Zinfandel in them. It's really, really fantastic looking dish when you're going to plate it. So what we can do now is we're in great shape. We're going to leave this, and we're going to get started on our pork rib recipe.
Super.